For those in the crowd that know Ron, you know he likes to do things last minute. So I was asked to chair this, I think about 24 hours ago on a flight home from Chile. So my brain's halfway over the Atlantic. I also feel like I'm on a first date because I've just met these two incredible athletes, 30 seconds ago in the back. So this is either going to go really bad in the first 5 minutes or we're going home together tonight. I'm not sure which will happen. But we'll riff from there. And when I read their bios this afternoon and started to think about types of questions I could ask these guys, I was immediately struck that I couldn't think of two athletes that were farther apart. Here we have someone who is at about 1,000 calories an hour over 8 hours of incredible triathlon competition. And for me, initially, no disrespect,
I already know
the ultimate Uber driver. I was like, okay, he basically plays a video game. But then Julia sent me some of the initial results from this study that's coming out in collaboration with the Michigan State University. And I saw things like, an average heart rate of 170 beats per minute over how many hours of racing, internal temperatures of close to 39 Celsius. And I realized that actually, in many ways, there's a lot of similarities here between these two athletes. So, maybe I'll start with you. The typical question that a lot of triathletes get, and I'll start with a typical question, is as you move up, I know you're a very good ITU athlete. You're now third the last 2 years at Ironman Hawaii, just over 8 hour type of time. Nutrition is often known as the fourth event of triathlon. How much more important has nutrition become in the longer distances versus the ITU distances? And maybe give us a bit of a glimpse into what that learning curve was for you.
I suppose the best comparison is ITU, 2 hours. We had a culture within British triathlon especially where nutrition just wasn't a thing. You put an energy bottle on your bike, maybe you drank something, maybe you didn't, you maybe have an energy gel strapped onto your bike, maybe you took something, maybe you didn't. I did my first Ironman. 4 hours into the race, I realised things had to change. I was on the bike, usually you get to the aid station, you grab what you wanted. I stopped on the bike. I was so groggy that I got off, walked through every single person, grabbed what they could give me, and continued.
So what did you place in that first Ironman? It was that
I think
bad.
seventh.
Seventh, okay.
That's bad.
Yeah. And now what is your approach? Do you practice? Do you have a set plan? Does that plan change on the fly?
I think with all racing you have to adapt to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the last 3-4 years has been very much about refining everything. Especially during the long training rides, long training runs, through races, speaking to experts, some might even be in this room, I'm not sure. Yeah. When it comes to Ironman, 8 hours of racing, nutrition is very much the fourth thing. Actually, it's the number one thing, let's be honest. You're not finishing the race without nutrition.
Yeah. Mark, I'll switch over to you. And one of the outcomes of the study was that the idea that amateur drivers would lose 2.5-3% of their body weight in terms of dehydration, and pros were losing, I think, 1.8 or 2%. Everyone in the room knows the science behind dehydration and cognitive function. No disrespect to endurance athletes, but the stakes are pretty low. You might fall off your bike, or maybe you end up in a medical tent dehydrated or overheated. For you, the stakes are incredibly high. You mismanage a corner, you misdrive a corner, it could be hospital, it could be worse. Is nutrition taken seriously within race car driving? And now that you're aware, or maybe a little more aware of sports nutrition, is it something that you take seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's actually refreshing to hear David say the same thing until just recently, 4 years ago. It wasn't as taken as seriously, but it's really important. Hydration has always been an issue, so is core body temperature, things like that. One of the misnomers about motorsports is, where you have a triathlete that's on a bike. It's one very thin material, something that can wick moisture away, that can cool the body, that can get the skin temperature down, help keep the core temperature down. We have the exact opposite. We're routinely running in cockpit temperatures of up to 60 degrees Celsius. I have to do the conversion. I apologize.
60 Celsius.
60 Celsius, so up to 140 degrees in the cockpit in extreme temperatures when your core body temperature is close to 40, very close to 40 Celsius, and that's borderline very dangerous. We wear fireproof suits that don't breathe very well. We keep the cockpits enclosed for aerodynamic purposes so that the car performs better, but not necessarily the driver performs better. So there's not a lot of airflow. There's nothing to keep you cool. Since we race endurance racing series, which is very much like what David and triathletes do, but in the cars we'll run anywhere from 6 to 24-hour periods between 2, 3, 4 drivers. Yeah. We're routinely in the car for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time, and the temperatures rise, and there's no way to maintain them. Even when you slow down under a caution period, if something happens to someone else's car, you're actually the car heat sinks. There's less airflow, so there's less, and the engine runs in lower RPM. So any cooling device that you do have in there isn't effective anymore. It gets very, very hot.
So I know with Le Mans they rotate the drivers through. Is there protocols you use for cooling? There's a lot of physiologists in the crowd as well. The Tokyo 2020 Olympics, if you work in Olympic sport, is projected to be the hottest Olympics of all time. When you're not in the car, are you do you have ice vests? Are you cooling? What are you doing for nutrition?
So certain situations we have. You bring up Le Mans. Le Mans mandates the sanctioning organization that handles the organization for Le Mans mandates that the car cannot go. I believe it's 92 degrees Fahrenheit. It could be 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still very warm. So engineers
have 30 Celsius.
Yeah, so 30 Celsius, and it's a lot of that race is at night. The temperatures are a little bit more in line with comfortable. Yeah. Like, if you can imagine, 95 degrees in the car at 190 miles per hour is comfortable for a 4-hour or 3-hour period, yes, that would be comfortable. Conversely, because the FIA, the ACO, the organization mandates that temperature, and they will make you stop until the temperature comes back down. Conversely, I raced a race in Suzuka, Japan in August, which is, I don't know if anyone's vacationed in August in Japan. It's quite warm, it's quite humid, and we don't have a proper AC unit in the car.
Yep.
So it becomes very hot and very sticky, and you lose a lot of your body weight. And like you said, it becomes a hydration, an exercise in hydrating yourself. And we have learned to, especially pro drivers have learned very quickly what kind of intake you're going to need. And sometimes you just don't get enough.
Yeah. So, David, I'm from Canada. I live in Vancouver Island. We have lots of long course folks that are famous from there. Brent McMahon being one of them. Lives around the corner from me. I was reading in Canadian Triathlete magazine how you've had a real coming of age and how you surprised people with your first, third place at Kona, and I would say less so with your second, third place at Kona. But having been involved behind the scenes with athletes that are on the right trajectory, usually the team around them is not surprised because they've seen the work that's being put in. They see the numbers coming off the bike. They see the numbers in the run in the pool. And they know, on a good day, this guy's legit. Was that first, third place in Kona a surprise for you and your team, or did you think that was in the cards?
There's a big difference between knowing you're physically capable of doing something, but when you get to the World Championships, actually delivering a performance under the stress of that competition is very different. I went to the World Championship the year previously in similar condition physically, but mentally I failed that day. And that was the big difference between being a top 10 athlete to being on the podium. So yeah, I was very fortunate in that I was training at the time with the defending world champion, so it's a good comparison.
Jan.
Yeah. So he'd won it 2 years previously. And yeah, physically I knew I was in the shape, but it's 8 hours. Ironman is much of a mental battle as it is physical. And that was what took me a couple of years to truly understand, was mentally preparing myself for what lay ahead and being willing to put my body in that position in order to be on the podium.
So what are some key elements mentally that you needed to come to grips with the risk take enough to suffer enough, because it's a suffer fest. It's a lot different than the ITU race in that you got to kind of hang it out there a little bit and risk take to be able to be in there with the top three. Was it just a click one day? Do you have to work with mental performance? Like, what was the game changer?
I think the key change was accepting that it's better to go for it and fail than not to go for it at all. I think especially this year in Hawaii, where the start of the race wasn't going so great for me, it was very much a case of I either go and try and win this race and accept that it's okay to come up short and maybe push myself into a place where I do end up in the medical tent. I struggle to finish. And I think that was the big difference, was realising in order to try and be a world champion, you have to be willing to mentally take the risks and mentally go where maybe in the past you've struggled to be.
You know, you don't need to spare your secrets here, but I assume with you and your coach and your other the rest of your team, you've analyzed the outcomes. What big steps do you need to do to get on the top of the podium? Do you have a few, 1 or 2 key things that you think will be changers for you on that? Tough question.
It's a tough question. I thought, like this year I came to World Championships, I did the third fastest time in history. Any other year I'd have won. I came third. And I think that's the toughest thing, is that I can move my performance forward, but the bar keeps on being raised. And it's very much about looking at everything. You know, I've been doing elite sport now for 12 years. I've looked at everything every year, but it's very much about refining the process day in, day out. And yeah, I'm very much now a believer on, I used to be arrogant. I used to Google things and I thought that's the answer. I know this better than the professional. I think my biggest development as an athlete and probably as a person over the years is realising to find the expert that you trust. I very much now, all my training, in the past I used to be a control freak. I used to need to know exactly what I was doing, what I was doing, and yeah, like every detail I needed to know. And unless you could convince me better than Google, I wouldn't do it. And I think the big difference is very much I now trust the people around me. I find the team that I have faith in, and very much my only job in life, I don't know if any of you know Training Peaks, my only job in life is to turn the Training Peaks box green.
Yeah, Google's great, but 50% of it's wrong. You don't know which 50%. So you can get every answer you want, but you do need to wrap yourself up with a team of experts that you truly do believe in. And I'm a little bit ignorant on race car driving. Do you guys have a team of experts that work with you? And can you maybe describe what some of those people are and the roles that they play for you in your success?
Well, I mean, I've followed David's career for, I think, the last year or so. There's a lot of similarities. You know, we have, as far as our team, motorsports is definitely a team sport. We have a team of engineers that improve the car. We have manufacturer support that develops the car. We have to internally develop the car. But one of the things that was, we have a great group of mechanics that take care of the car. It's very
That sounds very similar, yeah.
Right, but one thing that you may notice the similarity is no one's talking about the driver.
Yeah.
The driver is up to the driver. And over the last several years, there's a big concerted effort to improve driver performance, understand the science behind what makes a good driver mentally strong, what makes them physically strong, what kind of similarities they need. And different disciplines in motorsports take different requirements. One of the reasons that I came to be here today was through an accident. It was completely accidental in both figuratively and literally. And I had a suspension failure 4 years ago at a racetrack in Florida that sent me into a barrier at a very high rate of speed. Did a lot of muscular and bone damage to my body. 3 ribs, tailbone, ankle, tendon damage, muscular damage to the left side of my body, and I had to recover. And that was the goal. This is my livelihood. You have to recover from it, and you have to recover fairly quickly. And I was able to do that, but in the process, I met a sports therapist that became a very good friend and developed a plan for me. And from that, I also met a professor of kinesiology at Michigan State University, and they have been studying exactly this process. So Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, rally racing, and it's basically a collection of information of what makes those drivers good at what they do. And I was one of their first sports car subjects, endurance racing subjects. So for me, it was a great bit of knowledge to come in, and it gave me a kind of a building block of what I can do to improve. And from that, we have built an even different team to make sure that the driver components are on par with the engineering and support of the mechanical components. So it is very similar to other sports.
Certainly, from my limited knowledge in race car driving, it's the amount of metrics and the number of numbers you use to inform decision making is over the top. And as someone who loves numbers and metrics, but also works with humans who are athletes, not all the athletes enjoy the numbers and metrics. They're much more emotional. They're not machines. And so sometimes, I'm guilty of paralysis by analysis as well. Are you a metric-driven athlete, or are you someone that's more emotional and you need wattage targets, or do you need a kick in the tailbone to get out the door and do what you need to do?
I think now I'm very much a mixture. When I was younger, it was very much more emotional based. I didn't have a power meter until 2 or 3 years ago. I wanted to just go and hurt myself. But that only takes you so far. So now it's very much balance, and I'm lucky in that I have 2 coaches, one who's very much data driven, and one who understands some days Dave just needs a break. And I think it's very much about finding out who you are as a person and getting people to work around that.
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my sports science career is being over data heavy with athletes and coaches, and just polarizing people because it's not how they think or how they approach it. So yeah, for young practitioners in the crowd, find your niche of how much information versus how much emotion you should do. I don't know if that resonates with you. Your mic back.
Listen, honestly, any time you have engineer-driven sport, motorsports is definitely engineer-driven, especially on the high-end level. The amount of data that gets downloaded and regurgitated and inspected and looked at 100,000 times to the point of where's that line where it's effective and then it becomes completely ineffective because it just becomes a mess. Yeah. And as a driver, I use data acquisition on a daily level. I mean daily. Every session, everything that I do in the car, I critique, as well as other people critique. So I have to be a good critique of it. And sometimes you do have to set ego aside. So there's a typical 24 hours of Le Mans or 24 hours of Daytona. You've got an engineer that is just looking at data for the engine, and an engineer that's just looking at tire data, and an engineer that's just looking at chassis data. and then there's a driver that is my teammate that is looking at my data, and I'm looking at their data. So it's all to increase and to develop. We've had a conversation over dinner. It's just knowledge is so important, and you have a raw competitor. I mean, in any sport, I think there needs to be a raw form of competitiveness. It's my motivating factor before I ever knew of data acquisition, and before I ever knew that they had trainers and engineers of any level. It was just about beating someone else and being better at them than anyone else. And you have to constantly re-evolve and develop and constantly look at ways to improve. So everything that you do on a professional level is completely knowledge-driven. And you can't do it all on your own. So it definitely takes a good team, a complete openness to and a willingness to learn and develop constantly.
So in about 5 minutes, I will open it up to the audience and start thinking of some great questions, folks. I'm going to ask a couple more questions. As from a learning perspective, can you maybe unpack your race day nutrition as much as you can or can remember? And, we don't need to go, from breakfast and your pre-race poop, but like from,
I'm interested in
like we'll start from the swim. Yeah, from the swim through the bike to the run, and just how you unpack that. And they're going to ask the same for you afterwards.
I suppose just before the start of the race, I have some of this unit nutrition right here.
Yep.
And I also have a shot of beetroot. I've been using beetroot for the last 6 or 7 years, and I find it works for me. And in the swim, you can't really take on anything because you're swimming. And then the biking, it's very much, I aim for 400 calories an hour. And how I get those calories very much is based on the racing conditions. When you go to a racing corner where it's 35 degrees the entire day, it's very much fluid is key. There's a lot of people that go on racing hot conditions that truly don't appreciate how important fluids are, especially early on in the race. I've made that mistake in the past. I've ended up with medical tents because of it. So yeah, for me it's very much 400 calories an hour during the bike, generally fluids, especially in Hawaii. And the marathon run is difficult because anybody that's tried to consume energy gels, energy bars, whilst also trying to compete for a world title running, it's difficult. So it's very much about what you can handle, about what you can take in. Again, it's a lot more fluid based. And energy gels, but also towards the end of the race, it's very much about my form of carbohydrate rinsing, where I put the energy gel in, swallow it out and spit it out. And the whole day is about keeping the core temperature down, and that's the vital thing that I've learned from racing in extreme environments. It's the defining factor, I think, in success.
And would you hit that 400 calories an hour, about 100 grams an hour on the run, or does it usually come down a little bit then?
On the run, it's probably half that.
Yeah.
I've tried in the past, and that ends up being every single port to load for the second half of the marathon. That does not lead to a fast time.
No.
So yeah, it's very much. I find if I can get 200 calories an hour in, that's enough to get into performance at the finish.
Yeah, that's very, very typical profile for an Ironman for sure. And what about for you? Are you fueling in the car? Are you hydrating in the car? Is it during breaks? Maybe because the audience won't know as much about car racing as triathlon, so be specific.
So typically, we run a 6-hour race with 2 drivers, or a 12-hour race with 3 drivers. More than that with 3 to 4 drivers. So it's not uncommon for you to be in the car for a double stint or a triple stint, which is close to 3 hours. And through that process, the key element is always rehydration. It's just always staying hydrated, and it's not rehydrating. I'm sorry, I misspoke there, but as David was saying, at the end of the race, it's better to stay on top of it and ahead of it. And that's the biggest difference that we had seen in the study, was that amateur drivers tend to not are not able to relax as much, so they tend to not think about rehydrating. They don't think about hydrating at all. They don't think about when they get out of the car what they have to intake, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, and therefore their performance drastically suffers, where it declines much quicker than a pro driver. So I'm pre-hydrating before a race, but more so I'm very aware. We do have water bottles in the race. I try not to use any supplements in the car. Any flavor that you get, hot water is way better than hot Gatorade or hot anything. Like, it's like, you might as well be drinking milk in 40 degree Celsius bottle. It's just very, very unsettling. And it doesn't encourage you to drink it at all. So it's important to have that. But after we do finish the stint, it's not uncommon. We're not done in a 12-hour race. If I do a double stint to start the race, I'm back in an hour and 50 minutes later. So it's very quickly I need to recover 100%. Because if I have to go in the car more than twice, then the end of the race is where you really need to be at peak performance. And if you're not at peak performance, obviously it's important to stay at peak or as close to peak as possible. So you really have to take care of yourself and recover. I use a lot of fruit. I'm not heavy on carbs, very light on sugar, so just natural fruit. I do eat proteins in supplements, but it's mostly rehydrating or staying hydrated. And before each stint, I have seen a big return in the carb rinsing. And it's not something I would have ever done beforehand. But before each stint, 15 minutes or an hour before, I'll start every 15 minutes. I'll do a carb rinse and see a measure of this focus, increase in recovery. And for, like I said before, it's so important to be able to recover quickly. And my entire training is not necessarily about cardio and being able to go long distances. It's about being able to be 100% for 2 hours and then recover quickly.
So one last question, and then I'm going to hand it out to the crowd for some questions. And I'll ask the obvious question that I think probably everyone wants me to ask. What happens when you got to pee?
Well, if you're very good at where you are for your hydration levels, you never have to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
You get to keep it even.
All right. Cool. You never wet yourself in there, man.
Well, sometimes, personally,
24 hours of
personally, no. I mean, it's a true statement. Personally, no, but other drivers have been known to leave gifts for other drivers. It does not raise the morale of anyone on the team because someone either has to clean it up or sit in it.
I have an 8-month-old. I know what you're talking about. All right, on that note, we're coming up on our time here. I'm going to hit pause and really thank the audience for your great questions. I want to thank both of you for engaging with us today. I made it past 5 minutes, so I guess that's first base. So thanks, guys.
There's future in it.
Yes, I appreciate everything. Let's give you a round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.